Just a second, Martin.
Hey! I don't care, I'm coming in.
Don't you dare!
An Apple IIgs can do over 10,000 things for your family.
My computer.
Maybe even teach them to share.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Player One Start. In the previous video, I actually showcased an Apple IIgs that a friend had donated to me, and although the machine needed a lot of cleaning and detail work, it actually worked flawlessly. However, due to the fact that I don't have the software disks yet to run the system in the Apple IIgs OS mode, I was not able to test out the full potential of this system, or at least, so I thought.
So for those of you that have watched, I actually restored an Apple IIc, which was probably the first computer I ever touched. It was the computer that my grandpa owned back in the day, but the one I have is just the same model. It's not the one from their house. But when I got that, I realized the floppy disk drive wasn't always reliable, so I got this thing called an Apple Floppy Emu. And this is a neat little device that can actually emulate the internal floppy drive of the Apple IIc, but I noticed there are more modes for it. So I theorized, can I hook this floppy Emu device up to the Apple IIgs and boot a System 6 disk image? Well, it turns out I can. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
So here's the Apple Floppy Emu that I had before. Only now I decided to put it into the acrylic case that it came with, which that thing was a pain and a half to put together, but whatever. So on this device, if you press the power button, it resets it and will ask you what you want it to act as. It turns out this thing can actually emulate a lot of different systems. The first option there is the Apple II 3.5-inch floppy drive, which I may use later on. But for now, I'm going to skip past the 5.25-inch drive and go down to the SmartPort disk. That's going to set that mode as the default mode to boot into when I power on the system. So now I'm going to power off the machine, power it back on, and see if it'll boot to the image I've already saved to the SD card on this thing. And look at that, that is a screen I have never seen before. It looks like it's loading the Apple IIgs OS. Looking down at the device, you can see the activity light is busy clicking away as it is actually sending all of the data from the SmartPort card over this wire into the floppy port on the back of the machine.
Now, it's kind of hard to understand what I'm doing here with this floppy Emu device. To understand this a little bit better, let's go ahead and take a look at the hardware and tech specs a little bit, and then I'll explain what exactly it is I'm emulating.
The Apple IIgs is the fifth and most powerful of the Apple II computer family. It is a 16-bit personal computer produced by Apple Computer Inc. This computer was meant to give the look and feel of a Macintosh, with color and resolution similar to the Commodore Amiga and the Atari ST, all while remaining backwards compatible with earlier Apple II models. The GS in the name stands for Graphics and Sound, referring to its enhanced multimedia hardware, especially its state-of-the-art audio. This computer is a radical departure from any previous Apple II, with a 16-bit 65C816 microprocessor, having direct access to megabytes of random access memory, and its inclusion of a mouse. It was actually the first computer produced by Apple to use a color graphical user interface. Color would be introduced to the Macintosh II a mere 6 months later. It was also the first to use the Apple Desktop Bus interface for keyboards, mice, and other input devices. And it was the first personal computer to have a wavetable synthesis chip. The Apple IIgs made significant improvements over previous machines, such as the Apple IIe and the Apple IIc. It emulates its predecessors by using a custom chip called the Mega 2. And it also used the then-new Western Design Center 65C816 16-bit microprocessor running at 2.8 MHz, which is faster than both the 8-bit NMOS 6502 and CMOS 65C02, which were used in previous Apple II models. The use of this newer 16-bit processor allowed the 2GS to address considerably more RAM due to the limitation of 8-bit processors that came before it. The 2.8 MHz clock rate was actually a deliberate marketing decision to limit the 2GS's performance level to one lower than that of the Macintosh. The actual certified clock run speed for this processor was 4 MHz. And even though faster clock speeds on this processor would be made available throughout its life, Apple would continue to limit the clock speed to 2.8 MHz throughout its entire life. The main enhancement to the 2GS is its namely graphics and sound. Its graphical capabilities are the best of the Apple II series, with new higher resolution video modes. This computer can provide a maximum resolution of 640 by 200 pixels with 2-bit color, with a lower 320 by 200 pixel resolution mode with 4-bit color, both of which can select 4 or 16 colors respectively from a palette of around 4,096 colors. However, by changing the palette on each scan line, it is possible to display a 256 color image, or even more with some clever programming. Audio is generated by a built-in sound and music synthesizer in the form of the Ensoniq 5503 digital oscillator chip, which had its own dedicated RAM and 32 separate channels of sound. These channels are paired to produce 15 voices in stereo audio. The 2GS supports both 5¼ floppy and 3.5 floppy disks, like the Apple IIe before it. It also has several expansion slots. These include 7 general-purpose expansion slots compatible with those on the Apple II, II Plus, and IIe, plus a memory expansion slot that can be used to add up to 8 megabytes of RAM, which was really a lot for the time period. There are also dedicated ports for external devices across the back. Software that runs on the 2GS can be divided into 2 major categories. There are the 8-bit software titles that would run on any Apple II system before it, and the 16-bit 2GS software, which takes advantage of the system's advanced features, which includes an almost near-perfect clone of the Macintosh graphical user interface. This could be loaded off of a 3.5 floppy disk, or by using a SmartPort hard drive. The SmartPort hard drive was a hard drive that would plug in through the floppy port on the back of the machine, and that is what this Floppy Emu device is emulating.
Now, the Apple IIgs was mainly meant to provide next-generation graphics and sound, and still provide that backwards compatibility with older Apple II titles. Now, for productivity software, this wasn't really a big issue. A lot of people were starting to move up. But for games, if you wanted to get people onto another platform, you really needed to support a lot of the titles that were already out there, even though the new titles were going to be far superior in terms of graphics and sound. But anyway, let's go ahead and boot into the OS and see what it can do.
Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the OS and what the features are that are built into here. To me, it is very surprising how much of macOS has not changed over the years, such as having the Apple icon on the top and being able to go to About This device and seeing what all your system can do. So this is a version of System Software 6 that was developed for the Apple IIgs. You can see the total memory is about 1.28 megabytes, with around 193K free. The rest of it is being taken up by the OS and all of these programs running. Going into Control Panel, we can take a look at some of the settings of this machine, one of which is the mouse speed, which I will definitely set to fast. Having it on the slow setting means I have to move my hand several times to move the mouse from one side of the screen to the other. And while I'm thinking about it, whenever you see that black line make its way up the screen, that is actually not visible in person. That is just the refresh rate of the monitor messing with the shutter speed on my camera. Viewing this in person, this is actually very sharp and clear. But anyway, there are tons of settings in here that I actually don't know what they do, and I don't really want to mess anything up at the moment because, I mean, really, it's just working, so I don't really want to mess anything up to the point where it won't work. Moving on through the list, they have the built-in calculator app. I'm not quite sure this would have been very convenient back in the day, but I could have found myself using this every once in a while. There are also some settings in here that I can't really adjust because I can only have one thing plugged in while I have the Floppy Emu plugged in, which, as you'll see later, actually leaves me at a bit of a disadvantage for some of the software I want to run on here. Looking through some of the built-in software on this OS image, I actually found this thing called SynthLab, which, as you can tell, is a bit of a MIDI editor / music maker program. Unfortunately, I don't really know how to use this program, so I was just able to listen to the little demo tune that started up the program. It is here that I'll note that everything that you are hearing is coming from inside of the case of the Apple IIgs. There is an internal PC speaker where all this music is coming out of. However, if I wanted to use external speakers, I could plug them into the headphone jack in the back, and I'm sure the sound quality would be much improved. However, in terms of traditional Apple II music, this is leaps and bounds better than any machine that came before it. This definitely showcases off the sound part of the graphics and sound that they built into the Apple IIgs.
Now, the OS is impressive, and it is something that I really wasn't expecting out of a machine of this caliber. It really does look like Mac OS, at least the way it looked back then. But anyway, we're not really here to look at the productivity and the software end of things. We want to see what it can do for games.
Alright, let's go ahead and start with Battleship here. I am going to note I am cutting out the lengthy loading times. And this is a shareware version I actually don't know a lot about, and I wasn't able to find a lot of information about this version. But basically, you just enter in your coordinates, kind of like in a chess match style. I wasn't able to set up my own ships, so I guess I'm just playing against the computer until I eventually win, or I get tired of it. And I got tired of this, so I decided to go ahead and try a different game. Alright, here we have Yahtzee, where you're actually playing against the computer. And to tell you the truth, this version is not bad. It took me a little bit to figure out how to play it. Basically, you just click the roll button on the bottom, and then click on any dice that you want to get rid of on your next roll until eventually you are out of turns, and you have to choose which one of the categories you want this to count for. It is kind of neat, but I'd rather play this game with 2 players rather than against the computer, as I really do feel like it's stacked against you. Or maybe I'm not as good at this game as I thought I was. Next I have Dr. Mario, which I believe was developed many years after the 2GS would have had its primary life cycle. Unfortunately, this functions more like a tech demo, as the game crashes after the first medicine piece falls down. If this game was finished, it would actually be pretty good. Then we have Minesweeper, which is actually a pretty decent port of this game, although I couldn't figure out how to click flag placements, as there's only one button on the mouse. And on the Windows version, they use the right click to actually place flags, and the left click to clear out spaces. This next game is called Pac-Man. Although it's not a clone of Pac-Man as you would expect by the name, it is actually a port of the game Sokoban. I am very familiar with this game, as I played it a lot on the IBM PC version, and although I feel like this port is done very well, definitely taking advantage of the graphics on here, I didn't particularly care for this version because of the way the keyboard is laid out. The arrow keys being in one straight row actually made me make a few mistakes in a game where one mistake could cost you the entire level. After a while I did get used to that, and was able to beat the first level at least. Next we have a version of Solitaire, which still asks me to pay for it. I wonder if that address actually would work. The shuffling the cards message is a clever way to hide the loading time, but take a look at how slow it is to draw the entire screen here. That is a direct result of how slow this processor is. Back in the day, I would have loved playing this with a mouse, as one of my earliest experiences with Solitaire was actually playing it with a keyboard. So the mouse makes this game entirely playable. And last I'm going to take a look at a game called Super Mario Bros. Again, this is one of those games that was ported years later, and is a very good technical achievement on this computer, but again, the keyboard makes for some clunky controls. I should note that there is music with this, but for some reason it wasn't playing during this capture footage. It's just some generic music and it doesn't match the original score of Super Mario Bros., so in my opinion you're not really missing anything there. Unfortunately, this is just the first world, again only acting as a demo and not a full-fledged game. Because of the poor keyboard controls, I was only able to make it to 1-3, but still, it's shareware, so why not get it for your Apple IIgs?
Now that is some nostalgia. I can't believe that they got this GUI to run on the internal processor of this device. Yes, you can definitely tell where they had to cut corners, or how the system kind of struggles with it because it takes forever for these windows to load, at least something we're not used to today, but that was probably a similar performance of what you would get out of a lower-end Mac back in the day. The processor in this thing is only about 2 megahertz, so that's still fantastic considering.
Sadly, with this Floppy Emu device, I am not able to plug in more than one device at a time, so I can't transfer software from other disks onto my image, but I can set this into Unidisk mode, which will act like a 3.5 Unidisk module, so I can load in some disk images of games.
Now before I start messing with the Unidisk mode, I'm actually going to need to use the joystick. Unfortunately, the joystick that came with the machine, I actually haven't been able to get to work, at least not yet. I'm sure if I took it apart and did some finagling with the things inside, I can probably get it to work a little bit better, but for now, it's actually not an option. However, in anticipation of playing games on this machine, I actually got online and ordered a custom joystick that is designed more like a gamepad. So let's go ahead and take a look at this thing.
So here I have a custom-made Apple II joystick that will work on a variety of Apple II systems, including the 2GS. One thing that is important to note about Apple II joysticks is that they have a calibration knob for the vertical axis and the horizontal axis, which unfortunately may need recalibration between each game. Besides the seemingly prototype-ish design I have here, this actually looks like it's going to work, and I do appreciate the fact that this is built more like a game controller than the Apple IIe joystick.
Alright, let's go ahead and fire up some games. The big thing that I'm very excited about is that this machine works, and it works very well. Nothing seems to have gone wrong with everything that I've tried here, except for a couple of glitches with that EMU device, but for the most part, the machine itself is solid. So I still am very much looking forward to getting the original software disks that the owner had for these, so when I find them, I'll probably add another addendum into this video, showing you what else I was able to find. I'm also on the hunt for some Apple IIgs software, as I really want to run some things off of the actual discs and see what other games were out there for this system. That said, I want to thank again the friend that actually contacted me about this machine and the family that actually donated this machine to me. I want to thank you very much. It will definitely get a lot of use and find a good home here. That said, that actually is going to wrap it up for this video. Remember, if you like what you see, please click that like button below. Also, leave a comment below. Let me know what you liked about today's video. Let me know what games I should collect first for this system. Again, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I will see you all in the next one.
If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.